Welcome to the Family Banking Show with your hosts Rob, Derek, and John, where we dive into the world of the infinite banking concept and discuss personal banking strategies to secure your legacy and build generational wealth. We're glad you're here, and we hope this episode serves you well.
All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Family Banking Show. We're your hosts, Derek, Rob, and John. Guys, how's it going this week?
Good. How are you?
Not bad at all.
Yeah, it's going well. We just got back from a family vacation on my wife's side of the family. She's one of 9, and 8 of the 9 siblings are all adults now. Got to attend this sort of a family reunion, I guess. But it was a blast.
Good turnout.
Yeah, no kidding. That's hard to do in today's world, get everybody together like that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, guys. Well, this week we're moving on to part 2 in our book study on Becoming Your Own Banker by R. Nelson Nash. This second part in the book deals with the human problems as Nelson describes them. And we're going to go through each of them. But this episode in particular, we're just going to cover Parkinson's Law, which is on page 28, if you have the paperback copy in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
Guys, Parkinson's Law, just to give maybe a quick definition as Nelson describes it, and then if you guys want to add anything to it, go right ahead. He says that Parkinson's Law means that work expands to meet the time envelope allowed. Who would like to take the first crack on providing some color commentary?
I will. That just of the many things in this book that resonate with people. This is probably one of my favorite parts of the book, the human problems, because that is me. You know, I just imagine, just to think of all the due dates you have, school, work, yard projects. You just keep putting them off. You really do, until the pressure of, oh shoot, I got to get this done kicks in, and then you do it. I mean, it's just universal. Now that is a universal law right there.
It's like the honeydew list around the house. Honeydew this, and it just keeps adding and adding until finally the top blows. And it's like, okay, maybe I should get on that list.
Well, yeah. Well, hey, I'll give you a good example that was recent. So remember, we were going to meet this week, and I had to push it off. Because we had friends coming over, and all this kind of like yard work and housework, all this stuff I could have done like 3 days prior.
Yeah.
I just, for whatever reason, life, whatever, I didn't get any of it done till the day before everyone's coming over. So I had to cancel everything. And so Parkinson's Law in action.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think Nelson is quoted to have said, when people ask, what's the greatest risk with IBC? I think he's noted as saying, the greatest risk is you. The greatest risk is the policyholder. And most financial books that you read, there's, all sorts of books about money, investing, whatever it may be. Very few of them, though, get to the core of the human problems and get to the psychology. Actually, there is a book that I'm reading called Psychology of Money, but the human activity, the human involvement with money, with this strategy, with IBC or whatever it may be, is far more important, than the numbers, than the rate of return, than whatever it may be. And I'm so glad and thankful that Nelson addresses it in this book, because it's something that even us three, we need to continue to remind ourselves as policyholders. There's no risk of loss, right? We can eliminate that as the risk. The only risk is if we abuse the policy. And even so, there's lots of flexibility and controls in place that can keep it alive, even if you per se mess it up. So yeah, Parkinson's Law, this is one of the few that Nelson talks about that I think is just so important to whip it, as he says, to overcome and control and have that self-control and discipline to use this policy, use this strategy, IBC, effectively.
Sure.
Yeah, and a lot of this advice that he's sharing in this section not only applies to infinite banking in particular, but also just to personal finance, right? There's a couple of quotes that come to my mind here where he notes that a luxury once enjoyed becomes a necessity. And then along that same line, expenses rise to equal income.
Mhm. I
And
have a story. I have a
Go ahead, Rob.
story. So my current car has cooled seats. It's got heated seats and cooled seats. And my first summer with this car with the cooled seats, I told my wife, we as a family will never, ever buy a car that doesn't have cooled seats. And so that is Parkinson's law right there. And I'm sticking to it. I love those cooled seats, and we got her a new car a couple years ago. It's got cooled seats in the front row and the second row. So, yes. Wow. And I willingly paid more money for it, and I probably should have put that money in my policy, but man, I love those seats.
Yeah, a luxury once becomes a necessity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd say the lifestyle inflation or, expenses rise to equal income is maybe the primary part of this page as I see it, as it relates to IBC. As you get that extra, annual pay raise, say W-2 or whatever it may be, the immediate temptation is to say, okay, how can I go on this bigger vacation, buy this new iPhone, buy this new gadget, whatever it may be. That's typically, from what I've heard, I've been in the corporate world, I've been in, the military, everybody has those scheduled raises. And as your income increases, it's always, how can I buy the next thing? How can it be an expense that you just no longer see and no longer stays in your family banking system? So there's strategies out there to have like unconscious saving and conscious spending. I think that's a really powerful thing for like the psychology of how you handle money. And it all ties back to just how the user, how the policy owner acts and how they are able to approach IBC and use it for the good of themselves and their family.
Yeah, let's talk about that unconscious savings for a second. For the vast majority of Americans, contributing to their 401k, that's one benefit of the 401k is that it is unconscious savings. It's coming out of your paycheck right away before it ever hits your Wells Fargo account. And with IBC, you kind of have to take those, you need to apply the same mindset, but just take the matters into your own hands. So I'll just talk about what I've done. As we automate, every IBC premium is automated. It's a certain percentage is taken out of our checking account each week, actually, and set aside into a separate checking account, which then the premium is drafted from. Mm-hmm. So it's easy that way. We become used to it. And really the best thing that we could do is try to increase how much we're saving, and eventually just start a new policy, as we've seen that we can comfortably do it that way. Mm-hmm. There's a couple other maybe mentalities that come to my mind, from somebody that's maybe been familiar with Dave Ramsey and his procedure of thinking about finances and wealth. There's the envelope system. Another prominent one out there is the Profit First book by Mike Michalowicz. And now the new kid on the block, especially for those of us who are in the infinite banking world, is a program called Currents. Mm-hmm. But they're all trying to do pretty much the same thing that John, you're talking about, is that unconscious savings. Any other tips, or what are you guys doing to kind of to emulate the unconscious savings in your own life?
Yeah, I'd say it's similar with you, Derek. I budget out. I do annual premiums for my policies, so I basically just budget that out over a year, and I just automate moving that into a separate fund, and so then when the premium is due, I have the funds ready, and move it in. So yeah, I think that's a really smart way. And then you get used to not having it. That's right. A really smart thing about it is, but the hard part then is when you do get that raise, do you have the discipline to then take that difference and then put that in the fund until eventually you'll start to see, I got like $6,000 more per year than I did or something. I can start a new policy with that. So that's a really smart way to do that.
Yeah, and going back to Derek, what you mentioned with the 401k auto withdrawal before it even hits your checking account, there's a stark difference in that versus IBC, in that IBC is fun. And I'm not just saying it because I love the concept and this is what we do for a living and we just love it. It's fun in that as that unconscious saving, you're putting it, into your policy. It's protecting your family along the way. It's growing at a guaranteed rate. As you see like physical numbers on a screen that you're able to access with your own control, all these opportunities, like we've talked about in past episodes, come to the forefront of your mind. You see rental property opportunities, you see investments, you see cool, new companies that spring up from your network, whatever it may be. You now have fun thinking about how you can deploy the cash value, because if you did just let your money sit in your policies, that's one really good outcome. But if you are able to multiply the use and supercharge whatever strategy you already had in mind from your policy, that's when it gets really fun, and you're able to access the increasing pool of cash that otherwise for 40 years you're probably locking it up in that 401k, all while solving for the same thing that a 401k would be, which is retirement passive income in those later years of life. So that's where it becomes fun for me. That's where I see the huge difference. Again, another big part of it is that it's tax-free, that you're accessing that IBC strategy compared to just compounding your taxes in that 401k. So huge differences. And maybe in a later episode, we'll just focus just on the differences between IBC and retirement accounts. But it's just so much fun, to see all those opportunities that come from, and that gives you even more motivation to save, Yep.
Yeah. And you can access, like you're saying, John, like you can take loans against your 401k, but it's so restrictive. It's so limited. It's structured. It's like there's so many negatives to that process, where if you just need it, you're building up that same nest egg, that same retirement, that passive income in your policy. You can draw from that whenever you need to. If something happens in life, you just draw from it. You don't have to go jump through any hoops, and you can use it while you're, it's a living benefit. And so, yeah, it's just a huge stark difference between the 401k and a high cash value whole life policy.
The term that I'm thinking of a term in my brain, but I can't quite remember it. And the reason why I bring it up is because I want to know your guys' opinion on it, because what Nelson says at the bottom of page 28, that Parkinson's law must be overcome daily. Mm-hmm. And the term I'm thinking of is, I'm just going to describe it as kind of a minority mindset, or like there's a different word for it, but I can't.
Subconscious?
No, just like this idea of like, instead of increasing my income, I'm going to focus on decreasing my expenses.
Scarcity
mindset. Thank you.
Yeah.
So is Nelson a proponent of the scarcity mindset there when he's describing that Parkinson's law must be overcome daily?
Mm-mm.
Not at all, in my opinion. I think it just maximizes the abundance mindset as the antithesis there of to look at all these opportunities rather than trying to pinch pennies and see how little you can spend. You can see how you can maximize or produce all the more streams of passive income, maybe, and go and work from there, rather than just, you can only get so far down on that scarcity mindset to a point where you have to actually, live and not just eat beans and rice and live in a shack. Probably, like, you could always, I guess, continue to go down, but if you just spent that same energy towards producing and that abundance mindset, then it just becomes all the more powerful. And I think Parkinson's law and just the human problems and the human interaction overcomes the scarcity mindset in that way as well.
Right.
What sort of recommendations or advice would you encourage clients? Because we are the family bankers and we're thinking 3 to 4, if not more generations. When he says that we need to whip Parkinson's law in order to win by default, how do we maintain that mentality for 4+ generations?
Mhm.
There's this is in the Christian context and on the faith side of things, but I think his last name is Chalmers. I forget his first name.
Mhm.
He talks about the expulsive power of a new affection. And he relates it to, desiring Jesus and finding satisfaction in that, and how if you desire that, then you won't be worried about avoiding, say, sin or temptation or anything like that. So like the expulsive, it expels the affections towards sin and leads you towards Jesus in that context. And I firmly believe in that. And I think that does have a good parallel to this, that your new affection or your new desires is to think the third, fourth generation down the road and think of the heritage that you're going to leave, the values that you're going to propagate, throughout the generations, and your great grandchildren will honor you in that way. And all throughout the Psalms and in the Old Testament, that's definitely something that's like a value and something that I think we're called to even just consider, but actually implement. And this is a huge way. IBC is a huge way to do that. So if you're focused on that heritage of what your great grandchildren are going to be able to say about you and the legacy that you left and the provision that you gave to them, generously gave, just for maybe minor sacrifices in the first few years of a policy, then that expels all the temptations of buying that new fancy Porsche or 10 Apple Watches or whatever it may be, so that you can think those third or fourth generation down the road.
Good word.
Yeah.
I think, you always got to consider that you're living by example, right? And so, for some parents, they may feel uncomfortable sharing their personal finances with their children, that nitty gritty details. But in my opinion, what a great learning lesson to sit down with with first your little kids. And then obviously as they get older, hey, we've got an extra $5,000 Christmas bonus. What do you think we should do with it?
Hmm.
And start showing them like, oh yeah, we could go and spend it here, or we could do this, and here would be the results. What do you think we should do? And, just get those wheels turning of,
Yeah.
Because now they're going to have to start thinking, okay, well, what am I going to do when I get my first job and start my own business, or, whatever it might be. So anyway,
Let's say just another powerful plug then for child policies, because then you can shepherd your children through their policies. If they need something, let's say there's a thing they want, well, then let's take a loan out against it. You can get them learning how to become their own bankers at a young age. Yeah, just starting to plant those seeds, those generational seeds in the saving process in their life, super valuable at a young age.
Yeah, and obviously as time goes on, every dollar paid in premium equals more than $1 in cash value.
Yes.
So, that's, you got to wrap their heads around thinking 15, 20 years at least down the road of, what could be with those dollars today versus what they could be in 20 years from now. And what would you rather have? So,
right.
Well, good thoughts, guys. Anything else here about Parkinson's law? And as we're talking about the human problems before we,
I was going to say one last point in the last paragraph, or I guess on the same paragraph. He says, everything you do in the financial world is compared with what others are doing, with your peers and, people around you. What would y'all say to that?
I actually put John, that's a good point. I put a note under there. Focus on yourself, not on your neighbor. That's what I reflect is like, I guess if you want to look at the money game, then yes, you compare yourself to your neighbor. But to me, that is true. I think that's a true statement in the sense that that's how things are compared. But I would say focus on yourself. Don't worry about your neighbor. Just put in a process, have patience and discipline, overcome Parkinson's law, and don't worry what your neighbor's doing, because you're going to be just fine. You will win by default if you just follow this simple process.
Yeah, I think there's certainly the temptation is to compare, yourself to everybody else, right? And of course, by implementing IBC, you're going to be ahead of other people. But I do think that, it's really not that helpful to compare how I'm doing versus how Rob's doing. It doesn't matter at the end of the day.
Nope.
So yeah, I don't know. Keep your head down. Keep going. As
What's your
Rob said
take,
earlier.
John?
I thought the same thing. I think in the book, he's referring to not maybe IBC compared to IBC policyholder. He's probably comparing an IBC guy to a 401k, traditional needs-based financial planning type of structure. And I do think you'll win by default, especially in that case if you're an IBC. But that was exactly my thought is, I think love of money, comparing yourself, wanting to have just that extra dollar over and over and over again can be exhausting and frustrating and just not the point of IBC.
Right.
So, I just wanted to, hear y'all's thoughts on that last statement.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I had that highlighted too.
And we know, us three, we know enough of Nelson's character to realize that he really wouldn't be advocating for that comparison game.
Right.
But he's driving a point home here. He's advocating for something that he strongly believes in, and we do too. And the truth is still the same. By implementing IBC, you are going to win by default compared to your neighbor, but there's really no benefit in comparing yourself to your neighbor anyway. And
highlighting that just because it's unconventional doesn't mean it's wrong, doesn't mean it's ineffective. The fact that everyone, like many people that I know don't do this, doesn't make me any less comfortable about IBC. In fact, seeing the majority of people in this country struggle with the traditional approach to finances is honestly even more comforting to know that maybe I should go a different path and look for other options. So I'd say that's probably another aspect of that statement.
Mm-hmm.
Good stuff, guys. Well, in the next episode, we're going to be talking about Willie Sutton's law, and we'll just keep running through these human problems one by one. And if this episode was interesting to you, if you'd like to learn and explore a little bit more about the infinite banking concept, and you'd like to work with one of us three gentlemen, you can reach out, send us an email at thefamilybankingshow@gmail.com, and we'd be happy to schedule a call. Thank you guys again. We'll see you in the next episode.
Sound good. See you guys.
Thank you for joining us. If you're interested in a conversation about anything we've discussed, you can find our contact information in the show notes below.
And subscribe, follow, and leave a review to help spread this message and to help families across the country discover the generational blessing of IBC. May God bless you, and we'll see you next time.